Today we'll be working in my workbook called Joseph from Commander to Son, which covers Genesis 42 to 50. It basically finishes the book of Genesis. So looking at the table of contents, we've already completed the first two chapters. Uh, uh, this book starts where the 10 brothers go to Egypt to get food due to the famine. And of course, they meet up with Joseph there. Even though they don't recognize him, Joseph recognizes his brothers. And instead of acknowledging who he is, he's going to be putting the brothers through a series of tests to see have they changed since they sold him into slavery about 20 years prior. We don't always know if this is something that Joseph decided to do or if he's been told by God to do it, because it's a little different than his normal nature. And but anyway, we see that, and we see what results is that he keeps Simeon in prison, and the rest have to go back to Canaan, to the land of Canaan, with food and provisions. But if they are to get any more grain, they have to bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, who did not come with them, back to Egypt, which I know we know Joseph knows this is going to be difficult because Benjamin is the favorite of Jacob. So then in chapter 2, Joseph's brothers return to Canaan, and as they return, they realize their silver that they had brought to purchase the grain is in their sacks. And that when Jacob hears not only that, but the fact that they have to bring Benjamin the next time, and Simeon is still in jail, he feels like everything is against him. And that's where we leave chapter 2. Now we're going to go into chapter 3. Joseph's brother's second journey to Egypt. Genesis 43:1. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little more food." We know this is about the second year or close to the second year of the famine, based on things that will happen fairly soon. And of course, they're out of food. And we know that Jacob waited as long as he could because he didn't want to send Benjamin back with them. Did the grain that they bought before last until the famine was over? No, they have no idea how long the famine's going to be. Joseph does. What did Jacob want them to do? Go back and buy food. What were the two hindrances in traveling back to Egypt for grain again? One, they had to bring Benjamin, and two, all the silver that was put in their sacks. How do they deal with that? What happened there? According to page 20, with year of famine, this does have to be. And I have already mentioned that. It has to be in the second year or prior, probably in the second year of the famine, because of what's going to happen here in the future. Consider Jacob's decision for a moment. He doesn't want to send Benjamin because he is his favorite son. And he already has lost Joseph. But if there's no food to eat, then what happens to Benjamin? Benjamin dies anyway. So either way, he's at risk and he needs to do something. Just a note here, Jacob's family would not have known how long the famine would be, but Joseph knows. He knows that his Hebrew family will have to return for grain, so he's content to wait it out. Genesis 43:3. But Judah said to him, "The man warned us solemnly, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, because the man said to us, we will not see my face again. You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you.' Israel asked, 'Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother?'" Judah makes sure that Jacob knows the situation. What will the brothers not do if Benjamin does not go with them? They will not go back to get food because they know the answer will be no, and they will not go back to get food. Instead of Jacob, what is the name used here in verse 6? Israel. If God changed Jacob's name to Israel when Jacob was wrestling with God in Genesis 32, then why is he still called Jacob over Israel? There's not a clear answer. However, we do know that Israel means wrestled with God. Some have suggested that the name Jacob represents his old nature and Israel his new. That is, he's called Jacob when functioning in his carnal old nature, but he's called Israel when he's acting out of his new nature. However, this is not a strict rule, as often both names, Jacob and Israel, are given, like in Psalm 78:5 or Genesis 37:1 through 3. What is Israel or Jacob's question in verse 6? Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother? Why did you cause this issue by letting them know there's another brother? If you hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have to worry about Benjamin. Genesis 43:7. They replied, the man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family. Is your father still living? He asked us. Do you have another brother? We simply answered his questions. How are we to know? He would say, bring your brother down here. Let's see how Judah tells about the encounter with Joseph in comparison to what we actually have read about the events shown below. The man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family. Looking at the scriptures below, did Joseph question his brothers about their family, or did a brother volunteer the information to prove they weren't spies? So scriptures 42:12 through 13, 18 through 20. No, he said to them, you have come to see where our land is unprotected. But they replied, your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man, who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you're honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and that you may not die. So looking at the scriptures below, did Joseph question his brothers about their family, or did a brother volunteer the information? A brother volunteered the information. Did Joseph demand to have Benjamin brought to him? Yes. Does Judah say anything about the brothers being accused of being spies and that their lives are threatened if they don't bring Benjamin with them? No, he doesn't do that. Note, since the questions Judah relay as being asked seem logical to us, knowing who the Lord of the land is, it may be conversations that are not written about in Genesis 42. So we'll give Judah that credit, that possibly we don't know all the conversations that went on, but the scripture that we have do not have this questioning by Joseph. Genesis 43:8. Then Judah said to Israel his father, send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. As it is, if we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice. So send the boy along with me, and we will go at once. Benjamin is not a boy, so this word should be translated youth or young man. He's already 22 to 23 years of age, and possibly already has wife and children. 2, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. At this time, as we will soon see when Jacob and his family moves to Egypt, all the brothers have children, including Benjamin, who has 10. That's why he's not a boy. What does Judah give us a guarantee that Benjamin will not be harmed? Himself. He'll be held personally responsible. Quite a change in attitude from over 20 years prior, when he was the instigator to the plan of selling Joseph to the slave traders. If we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice. Therefore, we know that it has at least been 100 days, 40 days travel by donkey round trip twice, and one single trip they took coming home, since the last time they went to Egypt. This fits the timeline. Genesis 43:11. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be done, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm, a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, go back to the man at once, and may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I'm bereaved, I am bereaved. What is the produce that the brothers will take back with them? Balm and honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Note this is all dried goods, which makes sense during a famine. How much silver will they be bringing back with them? They will double the amount of silver. So there'll be 10 brothers going back. So they're going to double that from 10 amounts of silver to 20 amounts of silver, or 20 pieces of silver. Interesting point. How many brothers are going now? 10. How many brothers went before? 10. So if each brought a shekel of silver, how much is being brought with them now? 20 shekels. Looking below, how much was Joseph sold for? Genesis 37:28. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Genesis 43:15. So the men took the gifts and doubled the amount of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, take these men to my house, slaughter an animal, and prepare a meal. They are to eat with me at noon. What were the 3 items the brothers took with them when they went to Egypt to get grain? They took gifts, they took Benjamin, and they took silver. When Joseph saw Benjamin, did he emotionally react? No, he did not. What did Joseph have done once he realized that his brothers, including Benjamin, had returned to Egypt? He said, take these men to my house. He was going to slaughter an animal and prepare a meal. Joseph's statement lets us know when during the day the brothers had presented themselves to Joseph. When was it? Before the noon meal. Does Joseph give any indication to the brothers why he was going to be eating with them at his house? No. Why? Because if he's going to tell them who he is, which I don't know if he's decided that or not, he wants it in private, not in public, I think. Genesis 43:17. The men did as Joseph told them and took the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were frightened when they were taken to his house. They thought, we were brought here because of the silver that was put back in our sacks the first time. He wants to attack us and overpower us and seize us as slaves and take our donkeys. Were the brothers excited or frightened that they were being treated special? Frightened. Why did they think they were going to be turned into slaves? Because of the silver that had been in their sacks from before. In their minds, what's going to happen to their donkeys? They'll take our donkeys away. Obviously, the brothers are not thinking clearly. If they were going to be seized for thievery, wouldn't Joseph have done it in a public place to make an example of them to others? You betcha. Considering how different the environment is, they're going into Joseph's house. They normally lived in tents. It is a city with lots of people. They normally live in the country. The language of the city is Egyptian. They speak in Hebrew. Their clothing is different. They tend flocks in the country, whereas the Egyptians wear nice white clothes with jewelry. Scriptures continue. So they went up to Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. We beg your pardon, our lord, they said. We came down here the first time to buy food. But at the place where we stopped for the night, we opened our sacks, and each of us found his silver, the exact weight in the mouth of the sack. so we've brought it all back with us. We have also brought additional silver with us to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in our sacks." Had the brothers entered the house before they talked with Joseph's steward? No, they had not. Why did they want to give back all the silver they had found in their sacks before they went into the house, according to verse 18? And they figured if they were in the house, they were in a captive audience, and so he could make them slaves. But if they do it before they go in the house, then they have a chance of fixing it and escaping. There were many ways that the brothers could have persuaded this steward instead of telling the truth. Which of the following could have been a way they could have bribed the steward and still get food from their families? They could have bribed him with silver, not saying anything about the prior silver in their sacks. They could have bribed him with food they had brought with him. They could have killed the steward and escaped. They couldn't have gotten the food that way, though. Proverbs 10:9, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. Genesis 43:23, it's all right, he said, the steward said. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given your treasure in your sacks. I received your silver. Then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward did several things to reassure them. Let's explore each one. 1, it's all right, he said. Don't be afraid. Obviously, he spoke Hebrew and he could tell the brothers were fearful. 2, your God, the God of your fathers, has given your treasure in your sacks. Notice it's a God with a capital G. Therefore, it's the Hebrew God that the steward is talking about. Apparently, he has come to know about the God of Joseph. 3, I received your silver. So he did receive the silver. Now, whether he was part of the people who put the silver back in his sacks, I don't know. But I think he's aware of that the silver was in the sacks. Did God or the servants of Joseph put the silver back in the sacks of the brothers? The servants of Joseph. Either the steward was lying or he wasn't one of the attendants who put the silver back in the sacks. Personally, I think he was lying, as I would imagine that Joseph may not have many servants he could trust completely like the steward, else why would he put a show in public? 5, and why would Joseph put the show on in public? 5, he brought Simeon out to them. Simeon was released even before they had time with the Lord of the land, and before they could even repay the silver. Genesis 43:24. The steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkeys. They prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon because they had heard that they were to eat there. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts they had brought into the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. He asked them how they were, and then he said, "How is your aged father you told me about? Is he still living?" What did the steward provide the 10 brothers? Water to wash their feet and fodder for their donkeys. What did the brothers do before Joseph's arrival and after he arrived? They prepared their gifts for his arrival, and after he arrived, they presented and bowed down to him. Who did Joseph ask about? Their aged father. If you were one of the brothers, what would you be thinking about at this point? That this is all very, very strange. And we don't know quite what's going on, but this is very strange. Genesis 43:28. They replied, "Your servant, our father, is still alive and well." And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. As he looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. What is the difference in age between Joseph and Benjamin? You can look that up, but I'm thinking, it's 18 years? Let's see here. Be specific. 16 years. He was 17 when we was sold into slavery, and Benjamin was 1 at that time. You're right. Therefore, if Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery, how old would Benjamin have been at that time? 1. Therefore, would Joseph have recognized him now? No, he wouldn't have been able to. At the sight of his brother, what did Joseph do? He had to move out of the sight and cry in his private room. We have at least 3 times that Joseph went into another room and wept since his brothers first arrived in Egypt. We also see evidence of Joseph being kind to others despite his situation. Do you think it was totally his idea to test his brothers this way? Or was it a communication with God to test his brothers this way? Consider for a moment that their guilt on how they handled Joseph never eased. Benjamin, the second favorite son, was the target, and the amount of silver seems to equal what they received to sell Joseph. Consider also this is a test for Jacob, too, on whether he would trust God or not. What do you think? I think that God set this up mostly, and Joseph is playing along with what he had known from God. That's my belief. Genesis 43:31. After he washed his face, he came out and, controlling himself, said, "Serve the food." And they served him by himself, the brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because Egyptians could not eat with Hebrews, for that is detestable to the Egyptians. There were 3 tables. One table was set for all the brothers. One table was set for the lord of the house, Joseph. One table was set for the servants of Joseph, for the Egyptian servants of Joseph. This is not because he's head of the house. The reason why he has a table all by himself is not because he is head of the house, but because he too was Hebrew, although the brothers would not have understood this distinction. One commentator said, "It is known from Herodotus that Egyptians so abhorred all things foreign that they would not even use utensils that have been used by the Greeks." Here we see the wisdom of God. Before Genesis account ends, God brought the entire family of Jacob into Egypt, where they were isolated from the surrounding people for some 400 years. If God had allowed them to remain in Canaan, they would have assimilated into the corrupt and godless people of Canaan. And this is from Pastor David Hussack. What did Joseph serve for the noon meal? Remember, it was a meat that he had slaughtered. Why did the Egyptians not eat with the Hebrews? Because they abhorred anything foreign. Genesis 43:33. The men had been seated before him in order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's. So they feasted and drank freely with him. How were the brothers seated? From oldest to youngest, from firstborn to youngest. How many brothers are seated at the same table? There's 11 brothers seated at the same table. Looking again at page 8, if Joseph is 39, as Jacob probably is 130 at this point, what are the ages of the rest of the brothers? Well, you can look at that and do math, but since I'm here, I'll give you the answers. Reuben is now 46, Simeon 45, Levi 44, Judah 43. The first 4 brothers are real easy to remember because they're all from Leah and they're 1 year after each other. But then we come to Dan 42 and Naphtali 41, and Gad 41. So you know that Naphtali and Gad are from 2 different mothers, of course. Then we have Asher and Ishkar, both 40, again, 2 different mothers. And then Zebulun 39 and Benjamin 23. Joseph and Zebulun are the same age, again, 2 different mothers. Many of them were only months different in age, so the chances of getting all the brothers in the right order is highly improbable without prior knowledge. This is why they were so astonished, because they're close in age. Who was favored with more food than the rest? That would have been Benjamin. So now we come to the end of the chapter and do the crossword here. The brothers were to take double the amount of silver they took before. Okay. I'm going to switch my glasses. I don't know why I was waiting so long on this. Okay. How many sons does Benjamin have already? 10. 6. The nuts that the brothers took are gifts were pistachio and almonds. The brothers were seated from firstborn to youngest. What country did the brothers have to go back to in order to get grain? Egypt. What is Jacob's other name? Israel. Who reminded Jacob that Benjamin had to go with them? Judah. Okay, one down. Aside from Joseph, who is the other brother that is still in Egypt? Simeon. What time of day was the brothers going to eat with Joseph? At noon. Who did the 9 brothers have to bring with them when they returned to Egypt? Benjamin. Who was Joseph's attendant? The brothers met at Joseph's house. And then that would be steward. So that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.